Hello, I am Radagast. I'm joined here with Shelley Evans. Hello, Shelley.
Hello, hello everyone.
And this is MysticView on GMOP, or Global Mission of Peace TV. And the topic I've chosen, or we have decided upon, is perception. And what I want to discuss a little bit, and I have my little paper I'm going to refer to get it started, is how basically as spirits in biology, it is the sensory apparatus of our biology that allows us that we use to interpret the universe or the world around us or our perception of it. And that there are some serious limitations to our five senses, at least as they're currently configured. And probably the most powerful sense of our perception would be our vision. And when we look at all the various frequencies that are out there, because really what we're doing is we're perceiving frequencies. Our sight is based on what we can see in visible light, because really what we're seeing in the world is the reflection of the light spectrum. And we kind of have infrared at one range of our sight, and then we have ultraviolet at the other range, and then we kind of just drop off. And as we know from when we see things with night vision goggles, which allow us to see into infrared, we get an idea of what we're not seeing. And that there are animals like a mosquito, which actually uses infrared to locate us. I mean, it tends to travel through our exhaled CO2 stream to get in the neighborhood of something warm or exuding CO2, which usually means a blood-bearing critter. And then once they kind of follow close enough, then we come into sight glowing, like we see people glowing in those night vision goggles. So I just want to speak a little bit about how this limitation of perception has some real ramifications towards us living in the world that we do. Before I go a little bit in depth, perhaps you might want to come in at that point.
Well, I love that you came up with that topic. Think of all the great minds that have discussed perception. William Shakespeare said there is nothing either good or bad, but that thinking makes it so. I mean, I've got pages and pages of inspired great minds quotes on perception. And as you said, vision is probably the easiest way to conceive of perception, but temperature, color, sound, all of these things that we are accustomed and conditioned to using as our perception tools are really pretty limited until we recognize that. And at that point, we have access to expanding simply by thinking and feeling on that.
I mean, a case in point for, like, there are people who can see auras. Now, there might be a relatively small percentage, but they can see them and they can identify things. And so I guess a point of view is that just because you can't see an aura doesn't mean it's not there, nor does it make it go away. So we're dealing with a world of frequencies around us that exist and an impact on our own frequency level, especially through the aura and the chakra system. For people who don't know anything about the chakras, this is not a place for me to get into it. To me, it's like, if you've ever heard of chakras and you don't know what they are, please look at them. They're a part of our subtle anatomy, that part of our anatomy that is not physical. And so therefore it's in a realm that we often don't perceive, but it's part of us. I mean, we have whole aspects of ourself that we generally tune out because they don't fit into our normal perception mode.
Yeah. And there's a common, it's considered a syndrome. Really, it's not a syndrome at all, but where people can taste, color, feel, sound is an easy adaptation. We can all kind of get that about music, but where the senses are cross-referenced.
Yeah.
And if we think in terms of a simple analogy, is we all can really readily accept that dogs hear beyond what humans perceive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty easy step to begin to see that these things, although they might not be immediately apparent, exist.
Well, I mean, insects have been shown, especially with their multifaceted eyes, certain eyes, to be able to see all kinds of spectrums. I mean, just the mosquito, just the simple mosquito can see into the infrared. What now? It's I don't know. Haven't done any research on mosquito sight, so I don't know whether they actually can see into regions that we can't, and others are excluded. Like, in other words, do they have their own narrow band that just happens to include different bands than our own, or do they actually have an expanded band of perception?
Well, what we're talking about really is frequency. And so then what is the relationship between the frequencies? So that, I mean, we can describe that in so many ways. We can even describe that in geometry.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it comes down to, frequency. Whether it's temperature, sound, color.
Well, that brings me to the fact that much of our perception, besides being limited, is shaped by media. I mean, if we live in New York and we're hearing about what's going on in Syria, we're depending on other people to tell us, because we do not have the real sensory data of being in that area. So in many ways, the media has turned into our eyes, and even it tries to insert itself into our decision-making process. And I see through the media an attempt to get into our perception mode and create perceptions for us. And beg your pardon?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with you, but I wanted to add in that the eyes see only what the mind is prepared to comprehend, and so what you're describing is kind of a bit more than media. It's all the preconditioning that media has been so much a part of.
Yes, and I feel that in many ways the media is working in concert with the education system, where where a lot of that forming happens, so that when the programming comes in, that it finds a suitable environment to kind of incorporate itself.
Well, one little trick that I know of as a writer is to realize that it doubles your perception to write from the point of view of someone that you're not.
Yes.
And so how useful is that? I mean, we all need to be heard, but if we would be willing to find the safety in the space to simply understand what that other person is saying, now what we've done is given ourselves a great blessing by expanding our own awareness and our own ability to perceive beyond where we were a moment ago.
I believe I had mentioned that in some earlier video I'd made about the usefulness of, like, talking to yourself or writing or perceiving yourself as a third person. Mm-hmm. In other words, if I wanted, to see myself that I don't normally, I would say, well, this Radagast guy, and actually step out and look at myself as somebody else might, it's like, just give me an assessment of this guy that Radagast, because I do know him fairly well, but to kind of step back and then listen to yourself, describe yourself.
That's really great, and I use that with my clients all the time, although maybe not from quite that same perspective, but I'm always encouraging people, do view this from a third-party perspective, because what you're doing is you're kind of removing your filters, which is often our baggage, but it's the emotional component that has already translated what you think you're perceiving. So it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. It's what those filters have already interpreted as.
So as a musician, one of the things that I'm saying that's often controversial is I see people with headphones a lot. Mm-hmm. People who, like, you almost every time you see them. I remember at Omega. Now, Omega it particularly hit me because in Omega you have Omega Holistic Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And it was a place where, basically everybody walked everywhere. And you could, there was breezes blowing, there was birds singing, there were people laughing. I mean, delightful sounds. This wasn't the normal sounds of the city that you might want to tune out. And I would see people who often, when you would pass them, they were listening to their favorite tunes. And I just thought I thought it was kind of sad that something that is produced, especially modern, I mean, most people are listening to modern produced music, which is the equivalent, I've said it many times, of Taco Bell. It's kind of like, it's so packaged and processed, it doesn't resemble real music anymore. Mm-hmm. And just how odd it was that there were just people who chose to listen to Taco Bell music instead of nature. Mm-hmm. And so how there's a certain entrainment that kind of comes from the people who wish to shape our reality, and I see them doing it at almost every sense level. Like just people looking down into their palm, into their iPads as they walk down the street, their eyes are entrained. For some reason, what is on this little tiny screen is more important than the greater world around them. Listening to music like almost habitually is tuning out the world that actually has input for what your body is doing in it. The fake scents that, whether it's deodorant, whether it's cologne, whether it's those dryer sheets that people use, or the perfumes, mountainy, fresh, Tide, it smells really like a mountain. Mountains don't make me want to sneeze. And so I just really see the senses being assaulted. Yes. and to me, deadened and dumbed down. Even deodorants are getting in the way of us smelling each other and the information that comes there. And you're a naturopath doctor. You know how important being able to really smell somebody's breath in their body, how much information that's going to tell you about where they're at.
Well, we can see examples of that in the animal kingdom, how very important that is, and how we've moved away from that natural entrainment. So what you're talking about, music that's in a kind of canned music, that's different than soul music. I'm not necessarily speaking blues here. I'm just talking what has real soul. Like some artwork has real soul. It's authentic when you're inspired and singing. And so although we cannot perhaps choose all our external circumstances, we can always choose how we respond to them. And so, we're talking about having choice here, where you don't have to use dryer sheets. You don't have to use perfume. That's mostly going to be just chemical anyway. There are options, and we can choose to use something that's more that has the phytonutrients, that has the wisdom of nature in it, and let our DNA communicate with what's real soul.
And part of where I'm going with this is this entrainment of our senses to external. Much of it is external, and then it's not based on nature. Mm-hmm. And how I feel that is taking us from really examining ourselves, because. And even with the internet, everybody's going, oh, the library of it, it's like having the library of Alexandria at your fingertips. Well, almost, but not, the material's not quite as rich. But, and I got this something that David Icke said in a recent thing that I watched, that there seems to be this focus on intelligence or gathering of facts. And where the real thing we're after is awareness.
Yes.
And we need greater awareness, not necessarily greater intelligence.
Yes, because that taps us into what is actually a far superior World Wide Web or internet, which is our own DNA communicating, our own field of consciousness. That's way beyond DNA. But.
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly how we get there, is simple awareness and
And
presence.
and how the knowledge of self is really more important to the knowledge of events.
Yes.
And again, what the news does is it often presents us with like an avalanche of events for us to examine, but much of them are happening hundreds and thousands of miles away from us. Basically, things that might not ever impact us. The contrived promotion of Russia as a threat to the United States is, and it's presented as if like the average American needs to worry about Russia suddenly doing something strange on the American continent, because they hear people saying, oh, well, American interests are threatened. But the average person doesn't go, oh, wait, America's a corporation or operates as a business. And so the American interests are not the interests of the American people, it's the interests of the American corporations and what they're doing. And so when they're telling people, oh, Russia threatens American interests, what they really mean is American business expansion or business shenanigans. And so, but they're not being honest to people. They're talking about this threat that they, from their perspective, is real to them, because they're, it's kind of, there's somebody else on the block that is actually says, a little of this belongs to us. And we're going, no, it all mine. And so so much of our attention is diverted towards things that are not local. Again, the tsunami was a horrific event for people who were on those beaches of Thailand when that happened, but the rest of the world didn't experience that. And the news kind of brings us all into this collective event, and it's actually, there's not much that most people could do other than, kind of fret over it. So I just really feel that, a lot of our awareness is tied up with events that are just distractions.
Well, and really what it comes down to is what you had said earlier, is how much authentic information are we actually getting? When it comes to natural disasters like the tsunami that you mentioned, really what it generated, though, I think, on a positive note,
yes,
is the caring and compassion that we all felt. And I think, how could that have not sent up a wave of compassion past the stratosphere where higher minds, will say, can measure where humanity is at. So although it may seem on the one hand this is something very negative that was contrived against humanity, really there's a pearl there, the silver lining, where it depends on how we respond. But what I see is humanity has continued to escalate in responding with compassion. And compassion is so critical to our perception. If we can, even if it's a mechanical deliberation on compassion first, when it comes to perception, I think we're way ahead of the game.
Well, I totally agree, because compassion is perceiving with the heart.
Yes.
In my opinion, as opposed to, let's say, the third chakra or the mental capacity.
Yes.
And that's something I wouldn't mind speaking about for a second. Is like, we speak a lot, especially in the Global Mission of Peace in our symposium, about thinking or being in your heart space. And I know from my own meditations that often I'm going to a certain place, and then all of a sudden, something of contention comes into the space, and I can actually feel that the energy has moved to my solar plexus. I can actually feel the energies in my solar plexus. And all I have to kind of do is lift it up just one step into the heart, and the perception changes. And
so I understand what you mean, but can you tell people how to do that? It's one thing to say, oh, just get in your heart. How do they do that?
By, excuse me, by feeling it. When you actually envision, if you want, you can use light, and, a nice green is if you can imagine that color and pulling it almost as a band across your upper chest area where our heart is. But if you don't, even without green, if you just think of when you're kind of feeling stressed, you can kind of feel this movement in your solar plexus. And if you just kind of like just say up here instead, I mean, you actually take that feeling and mentally move it. Just tell it, come here, and just imagine, use your imagination. Imagination is how you work in the fourth dimension. And your heart is the fourth dimensional portal. And so you just imagine energy, just create some kind of buzz in your head and make that buzz happen in your heart area, and you've moved there. I mean, it really is just about mentally saying, not here, here.
I love that, because, you know, once man's mind has stretched to a new idea, it never regains its old original dimension. So once you've expanded it, you're not going backwards. So.
And how often those meditations will start with me imagining green, being in my heart, and go there. And then as you kind of are in that place, and you know, the mind starts to insert other things, you realize you've actually dropped. Mm-hmm. And you can feel it. You will feel that you're not, that little buzzing in your across the upper chest is now buzzing in your kind of like upper abdomen. And it's about moving that, and that buzz is where the energy is happening. And it's not all you have to do is just kind of quiet everything and pay attention to some input, and you will notice that, especially when you're thinking. Very often receiving news that you don't like feels like a punch in the gut. That's because the chakra actually, in my experience, actually kind of goes into a temporary spasm or shuts, and that kind of sudden contraction of the chakra creates something that everybody's experienced. Everybody has felt like that. Oh my God, I feel it right here. Yeah. And that is your energy, and your chakra suddenly kind of, you know, almost, you know, like think of a pupil suddenly going, like when the light goes on. Mm-hmm. If you're in a dark room, you put on the light, your pupils hurt because they have to so quickly shrink down. Well, it's kind of similar to what happens to your chakra when too much of something that overwhelms it. Usually something unpleasant overwhelms it.
Right. But it still remains that heightened perception is our goal. Mm-hmm. Becoming more aware of how we see, not just what we see, it's how we see it. That expansion of perception.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the perfumes in people's clothes, I mean, sometimes, you know, as everybody, I have a reputation as I like to hug everybody. So as I hug people, I often get a snoot full of washing perfumes. Yeah. And I've mentioned it to people. I'm like, ooh, man, it's a little rough. And they go, I don't even smell it.
Right. Well, and that's true. Olfactory.
And so they're in this toxic soup. And I know in me, it produces like things in my sinuses. I start to clog up a little bit. And a lot of people, I mean, sinusitis and other sinus issues are kind of rampant in society. You always hear about sinus infection, this, and I believe a lot of it is tied to these deodorants and perfumes that people use. They're toxic, and they irritate the mucous membranes. And so when you have an irritated mucous membrane, it usually swells. That creates a feeling of congestion. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, I mean, kind of their immune suppressants. So you might, the nose is a kind of a processing place for everything coming in. If your immune system goes down, suddenly you can have opportunistic infection. So then you have sinus infections. But I believe that so much of sinus infection is about the poisons that we poison ourselves with. I mean, again, if you use one of those dryer sheets, if you use a perfume, a washing machine, washing detergent, if you're putting on colognes, I mean, the average, you know, if you're putting on a scented deodorant, you are exposing yourself to toxins. And I really believe they're tied to what I consider to be almost epidemic sinus issues, allergies. I mean, people go, oh, I have this eczema or I have this dermatitis. It's probably the perfumes that you're washing your clothes with.
Right. And so our whether it's olfactory or any other sense, we only have a certain number of receptors. So once the chemical has latched onto that receptor, now what you're excluding from yourself is whatever the natural scent or fragrance. What is the beauty of being in the woods, smelling the trees? It's spring here. on this continent, enjoying those sorts of things, you would never have the opportunity for those natural gifts if your receptors are already super saturated and hung up using the clothing that you're wearing because it was washed and dried with those types of chemicals that you're describing, or perfume or anything. And there's so much wisdom, there's so much knowledge that's contained in these scents, for example, not nature scents I'm talking. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't it also apply that the uptake of false scents is misguiding us, misdirecting us at worst, and I mean at best we're still not able to avail ourselves of the wisdom of the natural earth and the beauty and the wonderful experience.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so if you got your headphones on listening to canned music, you're not hearing even the silence.
Yes,
is so important to us physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually.
Yeah, being able to listen for that mosquito that's hovering near you, getting ready to take a free meal and leave you with an itchy bump. Mosquitoes, I'm telling you, if you could get rid of the itch, I don't mind the blood. If you could just take it and like leave me without, feeling like I that I'm itching. If you could get rid of that itching stuff, I would be a lot less aggressive with you. Just a word to you guys. Do something about living comfortably with us. Okay, we're going to take a quick break because that's part of what we do. And as you might have noticed with the last Mystic View, we put in, you might call it an advertisement. It was really promotion for Blue Ridge Yurts, which is a little cottage industry, we'll call it, although they're in a building instead of a cottage, but it's a small building. And they're making yurts, which is a form of a way of living for a lot less. Let's put it that way. But one of the I would like to say that the idea to put that Floyd promotion of Floyd Yurt, Blue Ridge Yurt promotion in our material was part of GMOP's, or Global Mission of Peace's, giving back to the community. So we ran that piece because I wanted it in Mystic View, and the support and Global Mission of Peace supports that. So there's a local woman, there's two people, and they started Blue Ridge Yurts, and they make yurts. The wood that supports the yurts is locally sourced poplar wood. And so the whole idea is I'm living in a community, Global Mission of Peace is in a community called Floyd, Virginia. It means it's in there because I'm here. And I just saw somebody doing something good and something that I thought that I would like to promote. And it's even a style of living. I mean, we're all thinking about how to live differently, how to live closer, be more in community. And yurts are a transitional step. For some of us, they could even be permanent. But for many people, it's certainly a way of coming into an area, having really comfortable way of living. And then if you want to transition, you can. So I just want to say that the space that we're making to insert information or promotion for people is a give back to the world. It's Global Mission of Peace, really saying we're here to make the world a better place. And part of that, in this case, is promotion, free promotion. So I just wanted to, just in case anybody going, they're running ads, I wonder what they're getting for it. We're getting a good feeling inside of us is what we're getting. So I'm going to
thank you for joining us with that good feeling and supporting.
So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back, and it'll seem momentarily. Hello there, I'm Radagast, and I'm here in Floyd, Virginia, outside of Blue Ridge Yurts. Let's take a walk inside and see just who's doing this and how they do it. So Kathy, you're one of the proprietors, or the proprietor?
I'm partners with my friend Sharon Morley, who makes the wooden frames, and we make the covers here. This is supposed to be our welding room where we make our roofs. This is a hot wedge welder,
okay.
And we put our fabric up here on the track, and then that runs down the track and welds it.
They still make things in America. We've seen the inside of Blue Ridge Yurts. Now we're going to start looking at a couple of the yurts. This is just the basic layout. Very well constructed, very strong. All of this is locally sourced. So now we're going to go see what a grand yurt looks like. Looks can be deceiving. This is a 30-foot diameter yurt with 10-foot walls. Regular outdoor living, grills, tables, and a real door. A kitchen. Hardwood floor. A real stove. Couches, TVs, bookshelves, a spiral staircase, a very roomy bathroom, and the guest bedroom. Here we are on the second floor. Basically, I guess a master bedroom. A 5-foot in diameter dome for letting in light. And this is a really spacious bedroom. This is what you can do in a yurt. You can live as if you were in a regular house. Chances are in many places you could put up about 5 of these or maybe even 10 of these for the price of a house. Nice way to start an intentional community. Hello, we are back, the Mystic View, from our little break, and this is the good news segment. Shelley?
There's so much good news, it's hard to choose. I wanted to go today with Quantum University. Quantum University is a healthcare advocate, right, for natural medicine. They're not only providing information and classes that you can just access by going to Facebook or going to their website, but they are also raising the bar always on what the contribution for the future of natural medicine is. And so I'd just like to invite anybody that would like to go over and check out Quantum University. It's IQUIM, and they have magnificent teachers and professors, and it's a real gift to humanity, really, and to the future of natural medicine, what they're offering.
Well, my good news, which is a matter of local perspective, is that it's been very windy in a lot of parts of the United States. I mean, wind for days. As a matter of fact, tomorrow they're predicting winds in this area up to 30 miles an hour. Even today, they're like 14, 18 miles an hour. These, this is gusty stuff. So the good news about all this gusty winds is apparently wherever we have long periods of gusty winds, there's no chemtrails. So a lot of people who have been reporting they haven't seen chemtrails in days. I haven't seen them in a week, but we've had a week of very windy weather here. I mean, really atypical, swirling kinds of winds. And every day I go out and I look for, signs of mischief, and there's been no signs of mischief. Of course, in our pre-talk before we started rolling again, apparently it's not so windy in Canada, so they're up to their normal shenanigans, right?
Oh, we've been hammered with, but not to detract from your good news, because one man's garbage is another man's treasure. So I'm happy for you and the whole rest of the world that isn't dealing with chemtrails right now. And I'll look forward to that strong gust of wind blowing them away or dissipating them. Hey, that brings me to some more good news. In Global Mission of Peace, everybody has their humanitarian projects. Mm-hmm. Well, one of our beautiful hearts there, Mary Beth, she didn't have a project, but what she's eternally doing is sending love out and dissipating things like chemtrails. So yes. Good news is we have someone like that on our team.
Sorry, I had a good news. Oh yes, the good news also is that contrary to what it might appear, the New World Order, cabal, elite, Illuminati, whatever you want to call the maladjusted personalities that have a lot to say, especially in the Western world, they seem to not be prevailing. I mean, you can, Benjamin Fulford, you can take with probably a few grains of salt and occasionally some peppermint oil for nausea. But it does seem to be a clear indication that sanity is prevailing. From what I can tell from reading, and especially, I mean, from many reports, whether you're reading RT, Zero Hedge, you know, Veterans Today, different places, again, it's not you're going to get, quote, the truth, but you're going to get more data to kind of use your perception to see what's going on. And it really seems as if you can kind of see, if you read the news coming out of, especially about in American politics, it often seems that one day Obama says something and then Kerry says another thing. And then, you know, the nut job Breedlove of NATO says another thing. And you see all these different messages that don't quite work with each other. And part of that is that there is clearly differences of opinion at the highest levels. And for all indications, it seems that President Obama of the United States has decided that as pro-American as he is, and as much as he wants America to be the dominant force, he doesn't want to make that happen in an insane way. So it does appear that he has finally entered into a dialogue with President Putin of Russia and President Xi of China. Now, I think he's actually has a hotline to Putin that he's been talking to him on the phone. And then at this nuclear summit they just had this past weekend, it wasn't much about nuclear. President Putin wasn't there, but President Xi was there. And I really believe that if you go back to last year at the end of September when they had the UN meeting and those speeches were made, and you listen to what Putin said and you listen to what Xi said, they had a much saner view of the world. And it's a multipolar world instead of the exceptional country of the United States being a unipolar world. And I really think that even though President Obama probably would like it to be a unipolar USA world, I don't think he wants it to cost another world war. And I think he's seen some of his own State Department and some of the nut jobs in the Pentagon, because they're not all nut jobs, are actually aggravating things, making things kind of insane. So although I believe President Obama probably hasn't changed his tune about USA being the exceptional nation, we're not going to be the exceptional nut nation. I mean, we're not going to be the insane nation. And I actually think that one of the reasons he's putting out feelers to President Xi and President Putin is that they are showing themselves to be sane in an insane world. And I think that Obama has not gone insane. I think he has some of that feral quality, but I don't think he's quite rabid. I think he's wild, but not rabid. And so I think the good news is that through the insanity of certain aspects of our government, that the President of the United States is actually finding himself having to ally with the leaders of our supposed adversarial nations, because he needs sane people to speak with. That's my mystic view on what's going on in the world.
Well, maybe we can take that a step further and apply that ourselves, where we can choose the perception and the perspective of compassion to permit sanity to prevail.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's good news.
All right. So that concludes not only our good news section, but this Mystic View. And we thank you for joining us at Global Mission of Peace TV, and we will see you next time. God bless. Would you like to bless them, Reverend Shelley?
Yeah, bless you all. We love you.
Bye for now.